You're watching WION. Foreign ministers addressing the press after their first in-person Quad meeting hosted by Australia's Foreign Minister Marise Payne. Now, foreign ministers from Australia, the US, India and Japan are in Melbourne for the Quad meeting on tackling the menace in the Indo-Pacific region, cybersecurity, bilateral cooperations in the region and also the pandemic. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken highlighted the tension at the Ukraine-Russia border, saying that the US is building its defense and will give room for dialogue if that opportunity availed itself. At the same time, still cautioning Russia, Blinken says that basic principles are being subverted with impunity. He called for solidarity on the matter. Japan is set to hold the Quad summit mid this year. WION Principal Diplomatic Correspondent Sidhant Sibal is joining us live from New Delhi. Sidhant, Sibal, good to see you. What impact will this, foreign ministers meeting of the Quad have on the region?
Well, it's a significant meeting, and this is a reaffirmation of the not only formalization of the Quad grouping, but also Quad becoming an important stakeholder in the Indo-Pacific and in the wider region. Now, we know that the Quad meeting is almost over, in a sense that the last leg, that is the briefing, the presser is underway with questions being taken, and undoubtedly there was a strong emphasis on Ukraine, on the Russian build-up by the United States, because multiple times it was seen that the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken mentioned about the so-called Russian aggression, and this is something that has been the main cause of concern between the West and the and Russia. But if we look at the other members of the Quad, they have been very cautious about any public statement. Earlier in the day, we know that the Quad foreign minister had called on the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, in which a question was asked by a reporter to the Indian External Affairs Minister, what do the Indian side think about the situation in Ukraine. He was very cautious. He basically said that the focus is on Indo-Pacific, and India has stated its position on the crisis in Ukraine at the United Nations. And at the United Nations, India basically called for de-escalation, dialogue, the only way forward. So essentially, when it comes to Quad, this is a grouping that, of course, has a united front against Russia, against China. But when it comes to Russia, there are divergences, because New Delhi has close relationship with Russia. US doesn't has a close relationship with Russia. Japan also is a neighbor of Russia. But all in all, today's meeting will go in a long term. It will be important in terms of the upcoming Quad summit. The summit is going to take place in Japan in few months' time, and during that summit, the focus will be on how to take about initiatives on cyber, on counter-terror, on vaccines further.
Right. Sidhant, members of the Quad say they will support ASEAN partners. They will build a resilient supply chain. Concerns about Myanmar are rife. Why is it important for the Quad to be involved?
Well, Quad, if you look at the press statements, the opening press statements and the presser that is underway, there has been specific emphasis by Quad member countries on ASEAN centrality, because they ultimately know that ASEAN as a grouping is an important player in the region, and they need to be taken aboard in terms of various initiatives. The Quad has been announced, whether it's on scholarships, whether it's on vaccines. But on Myanmar, it was natural that will be discussed, given that Australia, Japan, India, they have been publicly talking about it. The coup happened last year. It has been almost 1 year since the coup in Myanmar. And the Indian External Affairs Minister, during his response on question on Myanmar, talked about that how India and Myanmar shared this long maritime and land border, and how New Delhi is supporting briefing the
Sidhant,
ASEAN
Sibal, sorry to cut you short
on the situation.
again. Let's go back to Melbourne, Australia, where the foreign ministers are currently addressing the press.
From coercion and the opportunity for states to preserve and protect their sovereignty and their territorial integrity. Where we see the sort of statement that was issued by the presidents after their bilateral meeting, it is concerning because it doesn't present or represent a global order that squares with those ambitions for freedom and openness and sovereignty and the protection of territorial integrity. And so we'll continue to ensure that our contributions are about stabilising the rules-based order, are about contributing to security and stability and prosperity. And that is one of the great values of the discussions that we have had today on every single subject that we have canvassed. Jay.
Well, I just add that, as my colleagues have observed, we are for something, not against somebody. And a lot of our discussions took off from where the Leaders' Summit left off. They identified a number of areas where if the four of us cooperate practically and efficiently, I think the world would be a much better place.
Discussed. The position of Japan is the sovereignty and territorial integrity have consistently been supported by Japan. We will continue to collaborate with the international community. We will take appropriate responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yogi. Can I thank you, ladies and gentlemen? I know. Thank you. Thank you very much, Yogi. Can I thank you, ladies and gentlemen? I know this has been a media conference late in the day.
Well, those are foreign ministers addressing the press there, and they've talked about, the situation at the Ukraine-Russia border, and they say that consolidation is needed and more conversations are needed with world powers to try and at least resolve the crisis at the border. Let me go back to Sidhant, Sibal. Thank you very much for staying on. We were talking about the importance of ASEAN in the Quad meeting. Why is it important for the Quad grouping to focus on ASEAN and more specifically Myanmar?
Well, when it comes to ASEAN, it is an important grouping, and ASEAN centrality has been emphasized by the Quad member countries. And whenever Indo-Pacific is discussed, ASEAN centrality is something that has been repeatedly mentioned. Talking about Myanmar, it has been almost over a year since the coup happened in the country. Of course, India shares a long land and a maritime border, and India is worried about the insurgents getting safe haven there in the country. And we know that the Indian Foreign Secretary had visited the country in December. The Indian side had requested for a meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi, but that could not materialize. But largely, the Myanmari side has been talking about that, how they will not allow their territory to be used for anti-India activity. In fact, in a rare interview, the the ambassador here in Delhi spoke to WION and emphasized specifically on this point, and of course on New Delhi's support on COVID vaccine. But talking about the Quad meeting that is happening in Melbourne, an important meeting, a meeting that of course sends a message to the world. Whatever happens in the Quad meeting in Melbourne, we are waiting for the joint statement now, will be keenly noticed not only in Beijing but also in Russia this time.
Sidhant, Sibal, live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for your insights and for talking to us today. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.